Hi guys, thank you so much for clicking on this video. If you're new here, it would mean the world to me if you would hit that subscribe button. But either way, please know that I appreciate you so much. So we're talking about another one of New Jersey's most savage killers, Mary Frances Avery Creighton. Mary Frances was born on July 29th, 1899 in Rahway, New Jersey. Mary Frances had one sibling, a brother named Raymond Avery. Mary Frances's parents died when she was just a teenager, and she was informally adopted by Mr. and Mrs. John Creighton Sr. after she married their son, John Creighton Jr. Mary and John had a daughter together that the pair named Ruth. In 1923, Mary and John poisoned Mary's brother Raymond with a lethal dose of arsenic. Mary had been named the beneficiary of Raymond's $1,000 insurance policy and would also inherit his trust fund. In 1923, John and Mary Creighton were both arrested for the death of her brother Raymond and tried in Newark, New Jersey. John and Mary were both acquitted of this murder in 1923. Within days of being acquitted of Raymond's murder, Mary Frances was arrested for the murder of her father-in-law, who also died of arsenic poisoning. Again, Mary Frances was acquitted for this murder. It was after this acquittal that John and Mary Creighton decided to up and move to Long Island, New York. Arsenic has been known about dating back thousands of years ago to ancient Greece and Rome. It was used by physicians and poisoners. The compound used for these purposes is known as arsenic sulfate. Arsenic was first recognized by alchemists. Alchemy was a type of pre-science that existed from about 500 BC to the end of the 16th century. People who studied alchemy wanted to find a way of changing lead, iron, and other metals into gold, as well as a way of looking for eternal life. Because of all the magic and mysticism surrounding alchemy, it couldn't be considered a real science. But alchemists have developed a number of techniques and produced many new materials that were later found to be used in modern chemistry. Arsenic has been used for murder in the past, especially in the Middle Ages. At that time, it was difficult to detect the presence of arsenic in the body. A person murdered by arsenic poisoning was often thought to have died of pneumonia. In low doses, arsenic produces nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. In large doses, it causes abnormal heartbeat, damage to blood vessels, and a feeling of pins and needles in hands and feet. Small corns or warts may begin to develop on the palms of the hands and the soles of the feet. Direct contact with skin can cause redness and swelling. Today, arsenic is mostly used in the United States for the preservation of wood. Once settling in New York, Mary and John Creighton befriended a couple named Everett, age 37, and Ada, age 34, Applegate. Because this was at the height of the Great Depression, Everett and Ada moved in with John and Mary to save money. Everett and Ada had one child, a daughter named Agnes, who was 12 at the time. John and Mary's daughter, Ruth, was 15 at this time. It has been alleged that Everett Applegate seduced 16-year-old Ruth Creighton, but also that he was having an affair with Mary Creighton. Regardless of whether either of these were the motive, Mary Creighton grabbed the arsenic bottle and began poisoning Ada Applegate. In September of 1936, Ada began feeling ill and went to the hospital. Because doctors could not find anything wrong, they sent her home. And a few short days later, Ada Applegate would be dead on September 27, 1935. Ada Applegate's death was listed as unknown, with clogged arteries being a plausible cause of death. Ada Applegate was about 250 pounds and very unhealthy. She would spend most of her days in bed, getting up mostly to eat and chew out her husband for looking at other women. About 4 days after her death, Ada Applegate was about to be lowered into the ground when police stopped the funeral and seized the body, stating that some force other than human nature had ended Ada's life. The prime suspect, however, was not Ada's cheating husband Everett. It was instead Mary Frances. Creighton Ada's quote-unquote best friend and housemate. It is believed that the anonymous source that tipped off police was a bread delivery man that was sick and tired of Mary Creighton's bad attitude. He sent police the package of yellow newspaper clippings dating back to 1923. The clippings revealed that Mary Creighton had faced a jury accused of murder not once but twice and was acquitted both times. There was no doubt that Raymond Avery died of arsenic poisoning, and Mary Creighton, being the beneficiary of a $1,000 insurance policy, being the ideal motive. $1,000 in 1923 would be the equivalent of about $15,413 today. Because the prosecution could not prove Mary Creighton poisoned her brother or father-in-law, and because there were no witnesses, the jury acquitted Mary Frances of all charges. The same would be said for Mary's mother-in-law, who somehow swallowed a fatal dose of arsenic. Prosecutors had an arsenal of circumstantial evidence, including the mysterious deaths of several family members, a couple of the family's dogs, a motive, and marked antagonism between the two women. Because no one actually saw Mary put the poison into the victim's food, she was never convicted. Unfortunately for Mary Creighton, this time her luck had run out. After an intense all-night grilling, police finally had Mary Creighton's confession. It started shortly after the family up and moved to Long Island after being acquitted of the murders in New Jersey. The families were originally drawn to each other because both John and Everett were World War I vets and members of the American Legion. This was in the depths of the Great Depression, so like many American families, they were struggling. The two couples quickly developed a friendship, and when Everett Applegate suggested he and his family move into the second apartment in the Creighton bungalow to save money, it seemed like a no-brainer. Although pale and pudgy, within a year, Everett was able to seduce the very pretty 16-year-old Ruth Creighton. He was able to originally gain Ruth's trust by going on long rides with Ruth, 16, and his daughter Agnes, 13 at the time. Before long, Agnes was left out and Ruth and Everett were bed hopping. Mary Creighton even admitted to walking in on the couple several times. Creighton allegedly went on to tell police that she decided to do away with Ada because she feared that Ruth would become pregnant and she wanted Everett to make an honest woman out of her. During this confession, she also casually admitted to killing her brother and mother-in-law. After the confession, police wasted no time arresting Everett Applegate on charges of statutory rape, to which he not only freely but cheerfully admitted to. A day later, though, that smile would quickly change. Mary had offered up more details to police and was now saying that it was Everett who spiked his wife's eggnog with Rough on Rats, a commercial rodent killer made of arsenic. Mary Creighton continued to embellish and flip-flop her story. She said she was intimate with Everett. Then she said she wasn't. She changed the details of how the arsenic got into the eggnog. First she said Everett applied it. Then she stated it was her, but she had no idea that it was poison. But despite Mary's inconsistencies and lack of evidence by the prosecution, both her and Everett went on trial for the murder of Ada Applegate on January 19, 1936. Mary wept as her daughter Ruth took the stand to explain the improper and unlawful relationship between her and Everett. She even stated that there were several encounters between the pair, while Ada and Everett's 13-year-old daughter Agnes was in the same room and sometimes even in the same bed. Nassau County District Attorney Martin Littleton asked, "Was Agnes asleep?" To which Ruth replied, "I suppose so." On January 23rd, Mary Creighton took the stand in her own defense. After 45 minutes of pounding by the prosecution, Mary Creighton admitted that she knew Everett had whipped up an arsenic cocktail and gave it to Ada anyway. While on the stand, Mary Frances was asked if she took a glass of eggnog that contained arsenic to Ada, to which Mary Frances replied, "Yes, I did." The prosecution asked, "Knowing this, you took it to her to drink?" Which Mary replied, "Yes." Prosecution asked, "You stood by and watched this woman who was your best friend die?" To which Mary replied, "Yes." Everett's attorney, Charles Weeks, attempted to only get his client charged with the rape of a teenager and not murder. Charles Weeks struggled to be allowed to show the jury Mary's past trials, but the judge refused to allow it. After Weeks was denied permission to present Mary's past trials to the jury, he dug up a letter that Mary had written to a true crime magazine months earlier, attempting to sell them the story of the Newark, New Jersey poison deaths. Unfortunately for Weeks and Applegate, this did not help him at all. Everett had already admitted to unsavory trysts with teenager Ruth Creighton and even admitted to one time in his bed with his wife while all three were naked. Everett's lawyer hoped to convince the jury that his client was nothing more than a sex fiend and absolutely not a murderer. The jury of 12 businessmen did not see it that way, however, and both defendants were found guilty of first-degree murder at 12:47 a.m. on January 25, 1936, and sentenced to a mandatory death by electric chair. After the verdict, Mary Frances immediately began to weep while Everett remained stoic. At sentencing, Everett Applegate asked to make a statement, to which he told the court, "I knew nothing and had nothing to do with the administration of arsenic poisoning, and in addition to that, I have never at any time had misconduct of any character with Mrs. Creighton." Within an hour, they were on their way to Sing Sing prison with a date with death. Over the next few months, appeals were filed on behalf of Mary Creighton, but all would fail. A date of July 16th was set for the executions. As the date approached, Mary Frances became seriously ill. She collapsed several times. Her legs appeared paralyzed. She was unable to eat and lost a great deal of weight as a result. A commission of 5 doctors were appointed to examine Mary Frances and investigate her medical condition. The day before the execution date, it was determined that Mary Frances was suffering from hysteria as a result of her impending death. In other words, Mary Frances was healthy enough to be executed. At 11:00 p.m. on July 16, 1936, Mary Frances was wheeled into the execution chamber at Sing Sing prison. She was wearing a pink nightgown and a black satin kimono. The back of her head, where the electrodes were to be attached, had been shaved, and she was holding rosary beads. She made no sounds, nor did she utter any last words. No one will ever know for sure that she was even aware of the execution. She was lifted into the electric chair, limp and unresisting, with her eyes closed and the color drained from her face. After checking that all necessary connections had been made, Mr. Elliott gently raised her hand and pressed it against the rubber headrest to secure it in position. Guards placed themselves between the chair and the observation window to block the condition of Mary Frances. As soon as they did, the executioner flipped the switch and Mary Frances Creighton was dead. With the odor of burning flesh still looming in the air, Elliott Applegate entered the chamber to meet his fate. Before death, Elliott Applegate said, quote, "Before God, gentlemen, I'm absolutely innocent of this crime, and I hope the good God will have mercy on the soul of Martin W. Littleton," end quote. Martin W. Littleton was the Nassau County District Attorney that tried the case. And then Elliott Applegate was dead. Those of you that are still with me, thank you. I appreciate you so much. And until next time.